Welcome back. We turn now to Democratic challenger James Singer. James, welcome to Inside Utah Politics. Glad to have you with us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Let's start off with a background and resume. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've done through your career, and why make the jump into politics.
Sure. So I grew up here in Kearns, Utah. So right here in the Salt Lake County. I went to Salt Lake Community College and Westminster College. That's where I started to get into public policy. So I've been in that kind of work since about 2007. After that, did my master's degree in community leadership at Westminster College and working on a PhD in sociology, the labor markets, and social policy. And I teach right now at Salt Lake Community College as a professor of sociology.
I went to Salt Lake Community College, so go Bruins,
yeah,
we'll
Bruins,
say that.
Yeah.
Why make the jump into politics? Because you've never made a run for office before, and this is a pretty big office to start with.
It really is. I think my skill set lends itself well. I think some of the problems that we're dealing with in our country specifically, it requires someone to look at things systemically. And so after being kind of involved in the activist field and looking at public policy, I was questioning, we need someone with a particular kind of skill set that we're not seeing from our Utah delegation. That's why I decided to jump in.
Let's talk about some of those issues that are pressing all across the country right now, and of course a big one here in the state of Utah, public lands.
Yeah.
Your take on what's happening with public lands in our state right now?
Well, it looks like there's been a lot of really bad proposals when it comes to public lands, where a lot of the legislation that's trying to get through is going to be for special interests, and these belong to all of us. This is public lands that belong to us as Utahns and as us as Americans. We need to preserve and protect that so we can see the beauty of that landscape in perpetuity.
President Trump made pretty drastic changes to both Grand Staircase and Bears Ears.
Yeah.
Is that the right direction to go?
It is not the right direction to go.
Why
This is a country based on democracy and equality. And those kinds of things that he's doing is very authoritarian. It's not asking the kinds of input that's necessary for our entire country. It was something that was done very unilaterally.
Is it necessary for those designations to be so big, though? We're talking 1.3 and 1.9 million acres. Yeah,
I think it definitely does. There was an ecologist that said that we should actually be preserving and protecting at least half of our lands and our waterscapes in order for us to have a sustainable future. And so this area protects large areas of archaeological sites that haven't been studied, that aren't on the surveys, but would be considered not in that part that they have designated.
So make the argument for why it should stay Bears Ears, for example, the way it was designated under President Obama versus what your competitor, your opponent, is talking about in, bringing it down but still protecting the areas around it.
Sure. So most of that land was already very much protected. What this does in that area is prevents future fossil fuel development, and that has decimated the land down in those areas. The communities will see a boom and bust cycle. It's not good for the kind of economic growth that we're looking for that area.
But in the Bears Ears area, they're not talking about developing it for oil and natural gas. In fact, they say there is none down there.
That's what they're saying now. But we see that already there have been claims put out from a mining company out of Canada that wants to take advantage of the new designations that open up those kinds of lands.
Let's move on to health care. Do you support the Affordable Care Act?
I do.
Why?
I do. I think it's important to recognize that health care is not a commodity. It is a human right. And so we need to go beyond just what the Affordable Care Act does and move to a single payer type of healthcare system. This will be less expensive for us in the long run, and it'll also help small businesses because they won't have to provide those kinds of benefits to their employees.
Why do you say it would be less expensive in the long run?
Looking at some of the projections that they have put out, it shows that because the government is so large, we'd be able to negotiate with pharmaceuticals and have better pricing when it comes to the kinds of procedures that would be going on.
Immigration, another huge topic right now. Where does the conversation need to go from here?
We're looking at immigration as something that should be considered much more humanely than we are right now. We've seen family separation. My wife is an immigrant from Venezuela. When she came here, pretty much she had to live in the shadows, and this is not the kind of thing that we need to be doing. People can come in. We see the exchange of goods all the time. Labor is part of that. They're already part of our society. They want to integrate, and we should do that as quickly as possible.
What do you see as the way to do that for those specifically that came in and still remain here illegally?
Yeah, so part of the problem I see is that sometimes we have bad laws, and when we call something illegal, if the law is bad, it doesn't make sense morally with what we believe. And so changing those laws so that their status can be legal by documenting them, by letting them put into the kinds of social safety nets that we already have, and then taking out when it's time. They're a part of our society. We should treat them as future Americans.
So a clear path to citizenship for all those that are in the country currently.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we've seen wave of different kinds of immigration come into our country and make it stronger. And each time they've been able to become part of that and make our society much better.
What about balancing security with that? There's a concern on the flip side of that we are protecting national security.
Oh, and we definitely need to be protecting our borders as much as we can. We shouldn't be keeping any kind of foreign power or anyone who wants to do us harm. We should be very much having some strong borders against that.
The latest Utah policy poll has you down 46 points in this race. I don't need to tell you that's a huge deficit. So when you approach a race like that, what's your strategy? What are you going to be doing in between now and when ballots start to go out to try to win over some of those votes?
Sure. The main thing we're doing is activating people with a similar kind of value system that we have. I think the approach to politics that we're taking in this campaign, my campaign, is one based on empathy, on social responsibility, on transparency, on fairness. And those things we're not seeing in our politics. Every time that we've gone up and down the district and we've shared this message with people, it's resonated, whether they be conservative or whether they be liberal or progressive.
If it is resonating, why are we seeing that type of a poll number?
I think part of the problem is how that poll was conducted. I still haven't seen the methodology, and as a social scientist, I'd like to know, because looking at those poll numbers doesn't match up with what I'm seeing.
So you feel like you're closer than 46 points?
We definitely do.
All right. Appreciate your time.
We'll
be keeping a close eye on this race as it gets near. Mail-in ballots will be coming out soon.
Great.
And best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Still to come, Proposition 2, which would legalize medical cannabis in Utah, is the most heated issue on this year's ballot. Our panel debates after the break. Stay with us.